Good morning, family, and welcome to another episode of In Real Life. Today, we would like to take some time to just quickly address something which is extremely important. We've got two pandemics happening this season, and right now we're acknowledging the fact that one pandemic has gone on for a very long time, and enough is enough. So last week we addressed it by saying, guys, racism is something that people are rising up against, and we are part of that conversation. So we opened it up by responding to what is a traumatic time for all and for many, and especially for the Black community. And we decided to say that we are listening. Today, we are resounding that message, and we're saying that we are still in the process of listening and taking time to really understand how we can take action that will be action that creates long-lasting change. So we want to say that we are currently having conversations that we are hoping will reflect something that will bless you guys in a practical way. As a Black person who is friends with white people within the church and within our nation and within different communities and industries, it has been a tough week, and the trauma is still happening. But one thing I'm really grateful to have you online today, Pete, to talk about is the fact that as friends who have a love-based relationship, we are doing this learning together. You said something really, really effective earlier on, and I was really, really touched to hear it, because the truth speaks volumes and authenticity is what we're looking for right now. So in the midst of a pandemic to do with systemic racism, we're ready to move forward in a way that you highlighted is an authentic way. Can you please tell us a little bit about what you told me earlier on, Pete?
Yeah, I think first of all, I want to say to our audience that Kamiji and I are friends, and that friendship has been going for a length of time. We're not just two celebrities or whatever you like to call them, who appear on the screen together for Facebook Live. And we have a genuine relationship that goes on during the week, and we have a lot of interaction going on. And we've been interacting personally around this issue and trying to help one another. And I think it is helping one another. There's a support needed and an understanding needed on both sides. But from my point of view, this whole thing of we're listening is really important, to communicate that and to say we're still listening. And for me, I would just, I'm aware that of blind spots. I think that's the thing. Now, problem with blind spots is you can't see your own. And so the reason that I'm a bit, I'm not slow. I'm in a process of learning, because I personally am a bit of an internal processor. So the way I educate myself is I absorb a lot of information so that I can come out with I think, a reasonable conclusion to that. And at the moment, I'm still trying to work out where my blind spots are, and I need other people to help me understand that. That's why this whole process of keeping on listening is really important. Another thing that's probably important for our viewers to understand, not many of you, well, some of you will not know this, is that I'm one of the elders or directors of Eastgate Church, of which Kamiji is a part of. She's part of that church. We love our church together. We've got quite a multi-ethnic congregation, in all honesty, and with which we are pleased. But actually, we're realizing that actually, even within our own context, we have to think these issues through and not be thinking that it couldn't actually be true of our church. That would be a massive false place. So the whole leadership of the church has said we're engaging in a conversation, not just one conversation, but we're setting up sort of like work groups. And Kamiji, you're being invited to be part of that, aren't you?
Absolutely. I think receiving an invitation to a conversation which is open and in which you're saying forthright, you're going to listen, is a step forward. And I think that as a friend, it just feels good to be heard in a way that is different. you know, and in a way that's saying, look, we're not just going to listen, we're going to listen and create actionable change. We're going to actually step forward together into a new culture which will be opposing the systemic racism which has for so long subconsciously affected so many. And that standing together and that solidarity is what gives me hope in this waiting. We've spoken about waiting on this program before, and I think one of the toughest things about this waiting, we've talked about coronavirus, and we've talked about how waiting can feel like, you know, that time that Jesus was in the tomb and you just think, you're just in despair thinking, can it really change? And the waiting of this week and the week before, and the waiting since, you know, the George Floyd case, you know, was publicized on social media, it has been painful. But I tell you, I would rather go through that waiting with friends who are prepared to listen and to learn, like you have been, Pete, than to go through that waiting with people who are not listening. And I think actually it's really important that this has been spoken about, even if it is briefly, as we choose to do some internal examining. So it's not just shallow and, you know, a quick answer or a quick conversation. It's, we're going to do some heart surgery. We're going to let God examine us. We're going to look at the context of Bible verses in the context of this situation, just like we have done with coronavirus. And we're going to acknowledge that sometimes change needs to come culturally, not just through words. And that has made the waiting a lot more bearable. It's a start, it's still painful and it's still traumatic. And we want to say that we're with you, community, we're with you. And we feel like Black Lives Matter, of course.
And this is as relevant to the healthcare community as any other. And,
absolutely.
You know, healthcare community is a very mixed race one. And we have to acknowledge that, you know, there might well be some red racism that is funding through that. I'm sure there is. And I'm sure there is.
There absolutely is. This is a time of research, isn't it?
I'm not doubting it. I'm thinking, but what I think probably is encouraging me in this is not that I'm discovering it, is actually thinking there seems to be a widespread determination to do something about this and not tolerate it. And so, and I guess that's where we're at the moment. And so this is the message. We are processing very, very actively.
Yes, daily together.
We want to come out with sensible things, not reactive things. I don't want to be saying things that are still from a point of blindness. And so we're all educating one another, and we're listening hard, particularly to the Black community, but understand that there are other minority communities, and you know, the coronavirus has a bigger impact upon the BAME community, the Black, Asian, mixed ethnic communities. So, you know, that even in the medical world, you might think, well, why would the virus actually impact those people more than other people? You know, it's not just white Caucasians, but it looks like some of the other ethnic communities are less affected by this. And you think, well, it's all a big mix-up. And I think we've got these two things going on at the moment, haven't we? And so, you know, we're trying to address both. And obviously, Heaven in Healthcare is here. And it's addressing this issue. And we've got our big mission of affecting the health world, which is a very multi-ethnic reality.
And I think it's so beautiful and so loving to stop and take time to acknowledge a pandemic within a pandemic that has kind of started before this coronavirus pandemic, but to acknowledge the collective responsibility that we have for both. And I think it's a strange thing to say, but I just want to say a thank you for stopping to acknowledge, because as much as it's not, you know, as much as this is something that should happen anyway, and it's good that it is happening, and it's like the tip of the iceberg, this beginning of the conversation. We've got to recognize progress where progress is happening. And that is something which I'm thanking God for. And I'm saying, look, guys, right now, do what Pete is doing. Like, listen, educate yourself, actively educate yourself, especially within your industries. And this is fantastic because currently, you know, we can look at the medical field and everyone's got their eyes on healthcare right now. So we can even start there. You don't even have to start with your own industry, and look at the disproportionate kind of effects things are having on the BAME community, and think, wow, we really do have to rise up against the people who currently are in need of love and attention and change for all. So yeah, thank you for that, Pete. We're going to continue our conversations, because we're constantly messaging, aren't we, talking about how we're going to actually actively make a change. We're constantly sharing resources, and that's another thing, guys. Look at resources of people who are at different stages of their progress. I watched a fantastic one, TD Jakes and Carl Lentz. That was amazing. Two people from different churches looking at their collective responsibility as the body of Christ and coming together to have an authentic conversation. And, you know, down the line, I'm sure that's going to happen more and more among churches. So do your research, be unapologetic in your learning process, be sensitive to others, and really recognize that there's a pandemic happening within a pandemic, and that Black Lives Matter and are worth speaking about. Okay, Pete, you've got some really encouraging conversation to have with us today. You wanted to talk about some miracles. We love miracles.
I just wanted another little medical comment. You know, from a medical point of view, as a doctor, I needed to make sure to get proper diagnosis of a situation. I had to keep asking questions until I got a clear diagnosis, and that, I guess, that's informing my process at the moment. I need to get clear. So getting the diagnosis right means you get the therapy right, which is actually really important. So, yeah, I wanted to sort of I talk about a couple of testimonies that go back a while, but they are illustrative of another tension that exists, which is that sort of the tension that we have between practicing great medicine and then great Christian faith producing miracles, and how those two worlds interact and interface. And and I told Kamiji these couple of stories earlier on, so she's ready to engage with it. But I had the privilege years gone by of actually being part of quite a large annual youth event, Christian youth event in the UK, where we used to have about 5,000 youth on this camp. And I used to go with our church youth team to support. I wasn't the youth leader, but I'd go along and support. But more than that, I was actually there as a supportive role as a doctor as well, because during that camp every year they would have a particular evening where they would actually look for healings to happen en masse amongst this crowd of 5,000 young people, and then they want the testimonies to come of healing to encourage people. Now, what I interacted with the leadership of this team, said, look, actually some testimonies are immediately publicizable, if you like, and some you've got to wait. Oh, we don't know yet. Is in the medical world, you know, some things you think, yeah, if you put that out, if that's broadcast, we're confident that has an authentic reality to it. This one we need to wait, because not all healings can you verify in the moment. So that was my job, and I used to love it. And there were masses of healings going on, and then actually I'd take the ones that I thought, actually, these are fantastic testimonies. All of them are. I'm encouraged and believing, rejoicing in the stories coming to me. But I said, at this one we can put on the stage, because that I think we immediately can say has happened. So now I was in one of these events, and this 18-year-old girl came to me, and she wanted to tell me what had happened to her. And she'd just finished school. She was just getting off to go to university. And she told me this story that basically she had really severe allergies of an anaphylactic level, where she had to have EpiPen ready. She'd already had, I think it was 3 or 4 emergency episodes where she'd had to be taken to hospital, life-threatening episodes with allergy. And she was allergic basically to various forms of fruit, particularly apples and some others, and also latex in touching balloons and things like that. And anything like that, she would endanger. She had to carry an EpiPen around with her all the time. Her friends were aware of all these things. But during this evening event, she really felt God touch her in a physical way. It wasn't an idea. She actually felt physically impacted by the power of God, and she believed that God had healed her. Now, what she then did would be something that I'm glad I wasn't involved in, because it would have given me all sorts of questions as a doctor, as you'll understand. But she decided she was going to test this healing out. And so she got her EpiPen out, and to a friend on one side, I gave the EpiPen to the friend and said, look, we might be needing this in a moment. Then to a friend on the other side who she knew had an apple, said, give me your apple, I want to eat the apple. And she did so. She ate the apple with a friend ready with the EpiPen. Now this is technically irresponsible. Do you understand what I'm saying? We're going, but she ate it, and then there were some balloons around. She played with those, and basically what happened was that she had no reaction to the apple, to touching balloons whatsoever. And so she came to me with a story immediately, and what I would think as a doctor is, if you'd asked me in advance if you do that, I would have said, no, you can't do that. At least we'd have to go to the emergency room or say, if you want to try something that out, it's got to be done in controlled circumstances. But going forward, she was completely set free. And we did a documentary of her a year later. She'd been to university, and you just imagine the change in her life of going to university without the fear of touching something that could spark this off, of able to eat food, be along with friends. It was a dramatic, life-changing moment. And it made me think, that we have to be careful as Christians not to stop faith in action, but the wisdom that goes alongside it. Now, sitting alongside that in the same event, it wasn't the same year, but another time, I had a 15-year-old come up to me on one of those evenings, and he said to me, look, I believe God healed me of my diabetes earlier in the day. I said, oh, that's interesting. And do you take insulin? Yes. Have you taken your insulin today since then? No. I said, oh, okay. And I said, so have you got your test equipment with you so you can test your blood sugar levels? And he said, oh yeah, that's in my tent. I said, well, what I need you to do, and basically we put a call out for his youth leader to come, and I talked with him and the youth leader. I said, look, I'm not disbelieving what you are saying at all, but actually for safety's sake, I need you to go and have your sugar level tested to make sure. And if you've been healed, it will be normal. And if you haven't been healed, it won't be. And then we need to make sure you go back on your insulin. And I think this is one of the tensions, because not everybody does get healed, but I don't want to deny the spectacular healings. And if he'd been healed, his sugar level would have been normal. So he went back with his youth leader, and I said, I want you to tell me. I said to the youth leader, I need you to tell me what's happening, so that I can give you, some help and advice. And basically, the story was they went back to the tent and they tested his sugar level, and it was high. He hadn't been healed of his diabetes. They came back and told me, I said, son, kindly, I said, at this moment in time, you haven't been healed. We need you to take your insulin for your sake. Now, the reason I tell those two stories is I've got the dynamic of both of those things going on, where I had to interact with them from a medical point of view, from a faith point of view, and that we have to manage to hold these things in tension. And it's not our job as Christians to hold back on faith, but we need to do it with that wisdom of interacting with the medical world.
It's a hard one, isn't it? Where there's no right or wrong answer there. And where God says faith without works is dead, and where sometimes you really feel like this is the time to test this out, this is the time to walk this out. And I really feel that girl's sense of, this is the time, because sometimes you just feel something come upon you and a season changes and it's like, this is the time. But she did it and it was great, which is fantastic. She had that EpiPen ready, which is also good. And I think with faith, it's really important to recognize that anything is possible. And that's why it's called faith, not because it's guaranteed. You can have, I was reading the word for today, and it talked about a word which I won't try and pronounce, pasho or something. I tried to pronounce, because that's me. I'll go for it. Someone can in the comments correct me, because I love learning. But basically, it's the word that passion stems from. And, having that passion, that it talked about Jesus having the passion to go to the cross, and basically knowing that there's a big risk that everyone else will see, but knowing that it's worth it in that moment to go for it. And I really respect that girl, and I really respect that boy for going and checking and engaging with conversation with those who can determine whether or not change has been made. And he went and spoke to you, someone who has part of the power to change, or to determine and measure change. and he was able to determine whether or not the change had been as progressive as he thought it had. And it's really important to look at the reality of our situations, and I think that's what this season is really teaching us these days. It's you know, guys, you are living in faith, you are walking in faith, you are faith-fueled beings. There is something which only relationship can steward, because at the end of the day, when you come out of a moment of testing where you're like, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to, you know, walk out my faith, you have to come back to the relationship with God, and say, God, my relationship with you is the thing, is the one thing that will never change, your love for me and my love for you. So I guess it's that collective responsibility, that individual responsibility that we have to recognize that faith without works is dead, but also that responsibility and making sure we check is really important too.
Yeah, I think respect is one of the most important things. Respect for both sides of the story, and I think that's where that what will help put these two things together. And I think that's something that I see can be lacking. I'm not saying always, but I think sometimes you find that the Christian world can lack respect for the medical world, and the medical world can certainly lack respect for the faith world. And I think we need to get that, again, it's a conversation needs to happen that takes those two grounds together. It's a similar thing where there's quite a prejudice both ways on that you know, just think of things like anti-vaccine, that sort of stuff. There's a prejudice against a medical world, and that's not just a Christian thing, but also the medical world finds it difficult to engage sometimes with the faith world. I think it's just make believe rather than reality. That's why we have to have these conversations with great integrity, and actually, you know, I think for the boy with the diabetes, you know, that we had to do that. That was integrity. His life would have been possibly at risk, you know, but I also had to make sure I kept encouraging him to believe that God could heal his diabetes. I said, now, and I said to him, look, check your sugar levels tomorrow. You can check it. You've got an easy way of doing this. Just keep checking your sugar levels, and if you know, by that you can see if things are happening. So, for diabetes, that's relatively straightforward. For some other diseases, it's more challenging. So something like epilepsy, you know, that's a really challenging one. You know, doctors would be very hesitant to recommend somebody stopping their epileptic medication, particularly if they need, you know, their driving license, or in an industry where you know that would be particularly dangerous. So we're just trying to highlight some of these tensions that do exist for the Christians in that world to pursue the miracles and believe that they can happen. And as I was saying to you earlier, that the two headlines in today's BBC News, as I was looking at it earlier on, you've got George Floyd's funeral going on in the United States with that world impact, and then in this country, the reality that the NHS waiting lists are probably going to double during this coronavirus time, and the idea that when the coronavirus is over, all of a sudden we'll have a rest and it'll be back to normal for the healthcare world is a fallacy. You know, the healthcare world is going to be under enormous pressure going forward, and that's why this conversation is important, because Christianity has got answers that help the health world. So just imagine that young girl, she no longer needed medical care. You know, you reduced her finances, you reduced the anxiety, reduced her visits to A&E. So Christianity sits alongside medicine as a way of relieving some of the pressure, and that's a really important communication at the moment. And we've got to get that conversation going, because we can be such a force for good as Christians who understand the health world, and we can supplement what is a very, very pressurized environment.
I think it's really important to highlight at this moment in time that both conversations are really important, but that at this moment in time, as in this current moment right now, as we're on in real life, that actually there's no sense of putting them on the that comparison, or that, you know, highlighting them in the same sentence. We've got to be really careful, because I think both of them are deserving of their own conversations, which is why this has been such a tough week in terms of preparation for this, because we're listening to essentially many perspectives, but that come under two different kind of viewpoints. And I think it's really important right now to recognize that the strongest thing we have is the relationship that we've had prior to now, and that actually digging deep and recognizing stuff that has been under the surface in and amongst the relationship and that's affected the relationship. Some have been silent, some have been ignorant, or some have been unaware. Like, that is an important conversation, but we will continue that another time. I think just recognizing that this separate conversation of coronavirus, as much as it has its comparisons, you know, it is essentially a separate conversation, just because we wouldn't want to portray that, you know, that there's a sense of one having that this is the one that we've chosen to speak about over another one. It's that currently we're having difficult conversations. It has been a week full of tears. It has been a week of mourning. It's been a week of soul searching and understanding. And this will continue. And I love what you said about coronavirus and how actually the collective responsibility will continue. Likewise, the collective responsibility for us as individuals to continue this movement that has happened within our spirits, to recognize that we have some more aligning to do with Christ in terms of the way he sees his children, the way he created each of his children, the black and the white, with the same value. And I'm looking forward to a time when that conversation is welcomed. And Pete, the miracles that you've spoken about and the responsibility that you've spoken about in terms of each individual, you know, being able to discern what to do during that season of, I feel God is on me, you know, I feel like this is a miracle. And that's really important. That's really valuable. So thank you for bringing that. And thank you for engaging. Guys, it's been a tough week. The best thing about In Real Life is that we want to reflect what's actually happening. So again, our hearts go out to you, to the Black community, to those who are having difficult conversations daily in order to create long-lasting cultural change within your own sphere of influence and within, you know, bigger spheres of influence with people that you may not know but may work with or whatever. We love you, and yeah, we're with you in this painful time, and we hope that you are able to draw some wisdom and some hope from the testimonies that were shared by my amazing friend Pete. And we're praying for you during this journey of learning, and we're going to come back to this topic sometime soon. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again next week for In Real Life.